Hello guys, and welcome to Shell Permissions. So in this Shell Permissions videos, we are going to talk about the basic and the quick or most important Shell permissions that you would be using. So the very first one I would want us to look at will be SU and SUDO, okay? So I want us to talk about SU and SUDO first. So SU stands for super switch user, and SUDO stands for super user do, okay? So SU is basically used to switch your user. So let's assume we have other users on this system. Obviously I don't, it's just me. But if you have someone else, you can switch to the person by saying SU, and let's say maybe the person's name is Tunde. And as you can see, it says user Tunde does not exist. Okay, so what if user Tunde exists and we want to switch to user Tunde? It's not possible to switch directly because sometimes in your Linux system you have to use the super user do, that is sudo, because there are some commands you cannot do with just SU alone. So one of those commands will be add user. So let's assume that we want to add user. And what does it say? It says only root may add a user or group to the system. So how do we switch to the root user? We can do that by using SU. I want you to see something else. SU login. This is for login. And now it says authentication failure, but that is wrong. You know why it's not allowing me to log in? Because I've not requested to do that as a super user. So if I say super user do sudo su then login, let's see what happens. You see, even without asking for password, it has switched. How do you know that it has switched? If you look at this, here I have the $sign, but here I have the pound sign. That is to tell you now that the switch has been done successfully. And as you can see, my name has changed from Precious to Root. Now I can do some serious stuff on my computer. But it is not advisable that you work as a super user because you can break your system. So we can exit out of this. Okay, so I just logged out. So let's clear again. So with SU, basically, you use it to switch to different users. So let's assume we have other users. So let's go back into our super user do. So let me log in. I just logged in. That is the command to log in. Let's add another user. And let's call this user general. As you can see, I just created a new user called General, and it's asking me for a password. So let me put a password for General. And I'll retype the password. And now it's asking me for a full name for General. So I'll say General Precious. Room number. Well, I don't have a room number. Let me just put that as 100. Work phone. So I'll put some gibberish here. Home phone. Come on. So this is how you add a user. You can skip by pressing enter and you have your new user. Okay. Now let's try to switch. So let's exit from this. Let's clear. Now we can try switch. So let's switch to the other user, and the user is called General. It's asking me for password for General. And as you can see, I just switched from Precious to General. So right now, you've been able to see that we can create users using the add user command, and we can switch using the SU command. Now, let me switch back to Precious because I like working with the Precious account. So SU, and I want to switch to user Precious. So you switch by using SU, then the username you want to switch to, then you enter the password to complete your switch. As you can see, my switch has been completed. Now, what if you want to know the ID of the user? All you need to do is to press ID, enter, and it will show you all the information about the ID of this user. So user ID 100 is for Precious, and my group ID is 100, and these are the groups I belong to. So let's check it out properly. So for you to check out the groups I belong to check out my groups, we use this command called groups. We just used ID. You use groups to check the groups that I belong to. So let's do that by typing groups. And as you can see, it is showing that I belong to the Precious group, ADM group, Dial-Out group, CD-ROM group, SUDO group, that is the super user admin, and some other groups that may not make sense. So, to switch user, you use SU. Then also, what if you want to know who you are? You say, who am I? Enter. And it tells you who you are. You are who? Precious. So, to know your ID, you use ID. To know the groups that you belong to, or your group, you use groups. And to know who you are, you use who am I. Enter. And that is that. And for you to enter, to do some super user commands, you use the sudo. Like maybe you want to add user, or you want to add a group. Okay? So we've been able to show that some time back. Now, but permission is not complete if we don't talk about file permission. And in file permission is where we are going to spend a lot of our time. So, in file permissions, you can change your group. You can change group of the file. You can change the owner of the file. And you can change the mode of a file. So, let's start with the mode of a file. And let's continue by creating some files. So ls, let me see if we can use C-Learning. So let me cd into C-Learning. And let me see if I have some files there. Okay, I have some files. Now, let's list out all these files by using the long command and hidden files. So, as you can see on my screen, I've been able to print out all the files I have in long formats. Let me clear so that we'll do this properly. Now, I want you to look at something. This part, look at this entire line. This is my file permission. Okay, I will come back to it. This is my username. This is my group. This is the size of the file and the time the file was created. Now, look at this file. So let me create a folder. Let me create two folders. So mkdir. I'll call this ABC and DEF. And let's create more files. Touch, test1.txt, test2.txt. So clear. Now let's run our command again. All. Now we have a lot of files. So I want you to look at something. When you look at this, you can see that this is my username and this is my group, the group I belong to. Also, this is the size of the file. So to be able to know that these are different, we can actually print this using to see the numbers. So we can say ls aln, and as you can see, it is my user ID is 1000 and my group is 1000. So it's the same. So on Linus tends to create a group for a user ID. Now let's go back to this. So let me just clear so that I don't have too much on the screen. Now, for file permission, if you look at this, the first part says D. D is telling you that this is a folder. Now, when you go forward, you see that you have the first permission called RWX. That permission is for the owner, that is the file owner. So in permissions, we have the file owner, we have the group permission, and we have others. So the first one here, this RWX, is for owner. The second RWX is for group, and the third R-X is for others. So what it means is that R stands for, so R is for read, W is for write, and X is for execute. So what this means is that since I have R here, it means I can read, I can open the folder, or I can read the file. If I have W, it means I can write, or I can go into the folder. And if I have X, execute, it means I can execute any script that has been created. Okay, so let's see this in action. So how do we mess around with file permission? The first way to change file permission is by using the symbolic system. In the symbolic system, you have U. So you have users. You have users. Then aside of users, you have group, G. Then after the users, you have others, and you have all. Now when you have that, it means that you can change the permissions of files individually. And when you want to change the permissions of files individually, you have to add some commands to them. So you use something like plus to add a command, to add a permission. You use minus to remove a permission, or you use equal to change the permissions entirely. Okay, so let's do that for one of our files. So let's clear this. So currently we are working with CHMOD, change mode. Now look at this file, right? For the user can only read and write. What if we want to add a permission to make the user to be able to execute? So the name of the file is LOC. So what we do is we say change mode. Then we want to add what to the user. We want to add what permission? Execute X to what file? lo.c. Enter. And now let's do LX all again. And as you can see, previously LOC, this is it, does not have execute for the user, but now LOC now has execute for the user. What if we want to add something for the group? Let's say we want to make the group to be able to write. All we need to do is say change mode, group is for G, plus what? W, because we want the user to be able to write, and what file? lo.c. Enter. If we do lx.al again, as you can see, we now have W for our lo.c file, that is group can now write. Previously, group could not write. Okay, let's clear. Now, what if we want to add a lot of different permissions for the same file at the same time? So let's do our LX to see everything again. So let's assume for this file called test1.txt, we want to add execute for the user, execute for the group, and write for the write for others. What do? We say change mode. The first permission is we want to add for the user is to be able to execute. Then the next permission is for the group. we want the group to be able to also execute. Then we also want for others, we want them to be able to do what? We want them to be able to write. For what file? test1.txt. Enter. So take note, if we do lx.al again, now let's compare what we have done, the permission. Previously, this is what we had. Now we added the permission that a user should be able to execute, and that is why we have the X here. We now said the group should be able to execute, and that is why we have the new X here. And we now said that we want others to be able to write, and that is why we have write here. What if, so you can see now that we can set permissions in group and we can set permissions individually, and that is why the symbolic system works properly. What if we want to remove the ability to execute from this folder DEF entirely? We can do it by saying CHMOD. So because of the command is going to be the same, we can say UG. So for user, group, and others, we want to do what? We want to remove the ability to execute. For what folder? DEF. That has been done. Now lx.al, let's check it. And as you can see, for DEF, previously, everybody could execute. You have X, X, X. But when we did this command now, for DEF now, nobody can execute anymore. Okay? But let's return it and let's ensure that everybody can execute. And as you can see, we've returned back the command. So let's clear. Our screen is getting clunky. So I just showed you the symbolic way. Now there is another way in which you can change or you can affect the file permission, and that is the absolute way. The absolute method is preferable when you want to do it in bulk. So the first thing you need to know is, in the absolute way, our read has a value called 4, value 4. Our write has a value of 2, and our execute has a value of 1. So together with this, we can change commands. So if we want to make a user to be able to read, we can give them a value of 4. Okay? What if you want to be able to read and write? It becomes 4 plus 2. That is 6. What if you want to be able to read and write and execute? That is 4 plus 2 plus 1 is equal to 7. Okay? So take note of the numbers. For read is 4. For write is 2. For execute is 1. So let's use it. So lxal. Now, instead of using symbolic, we were using UGO, plus, minus previously. Let's use absolute method. Now, let's change the permission of this test2 file. And what do we want to do? We want to make the user to be able to read, write, and execute, then remove permissions for the other guys. So how do we do that? We say CHMOD. So if we want to make user to be able to read, remember read is 4, and we want to make the user to be able to write is 2, and to make the user execute, that is 1. So 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. That is for the user, this one. We want to remove all the permissions for these guys. To remove all permissions, you say 0. To remove all permissions for others also, you say 0. And for what file? test2.txt. Now let's check it. lx.al. As you can see, it worked as we want. We gave everything to the user 7, but we gave the group 0. We also gave the others 0. Now, what if we want to change the permission? Instead of giving everybody here 0, we want them to be able to read and read and execute. So we want to make the group to be able to read and execute, and we want to make the user, we want to make others to be able to read and write. So for read and execute, let's do it again. So we say change mode. So since we want the permission for the user to still be the same, we leave it as 7. Then for these guys, we want them to be able, we want this guy to be able to read and execute. That is 4. That is read is 4 and execute is 1. So 4 plus 1 is 5. So that is 5. Then we want to make others to be able to read and write. So read is 4 and write is 2. So 4 plus 2 is 6. For which file? test2.txt. Permission has been changed, so let's check it. So previously we had RWX and 000 from here, but now we gave it 756, and it has shown you that 7 for user means 7 can read, write and execute. That is 4 plus 2 plus 1, 7. Then we say 5. So 5 is what? 5 is 4 plus 1, that is read and execute, and that's what we have here, RX. And we have 6, that is 4 plus 2. Okay? And that is 4 plus 2 is 4 is read and 2 is write. So we've been able to make the user to be able to read and write. So for you to remember again, read is 4. Okay? For absolute method. Let me write it here. So absolute method, read, which is arrow, is 4, and write, which is W, is 2, and execute, which is X, is 1. So when you want to change permission, all you do is just add them together. So if you want to give a file a permission to read and write, is 4 plus 2. That is 7 for a user. If you want to give someone a permission to write and execute, that is 2 plus 1, 3. If you want to give only execute, that is you use only 1. If you want to give write, you use only 2. If you want to give read, you use only 4. Okay? So basically, that is how you work with users' permissions. Okay, guys? So let me delete all what we have on our screen right now. Now, lx.al. Now, this file belongs to Precious. How do you change the owner of a file? So how do you change the owner of a file? It's very simple. To change the owner of a file, you use CHOWN. Okay, it's called CHOWN. So change owner, that's what it means. Change owner. So let's assume, remember we created a user called general. So let's change the owner of this file called test2. So presently it is for Precious. Let's change the owner to general. So to change the owner of a file, all you do is say change owner, then the owner you want, then the file. Oh, I typed the wrong thing. So change owner of that file. Sorry. So it's test2, not test. So you see, it says changing ownership of test2 operation not permitted, and this is as an issue of what's it called? Super user permission. So we can use sudo to force it. test2.txt. So it's asking for password just to confirm. So let's see if the user has actually been changed. As you can see, the user of this file general, the user of this file test2.txt has been changed from Precious to general. Please take note, On your computer, you may not need to use sudo, but I'm using my computer and I have a lot of permissions set so that I don't break my system. That is why I put some limitations for myself. So that is why I had to use sudo to be able to do this. But naturally, you use change owner, the person you want to change the file to, and the file name. So let's clear. So LX, let's do it so that you can see it. So I repeat, to change owner, you say change owner, the name of the owner you want to give the file to, then the name of the file you want to change the owner. Okay? So it's very important, changing owner of a file. So remember previously when we checked groups, we had some groups here. So what if we want to add a new group? You add a new group by saying add group. Let's call this groupie. And as you can see, like I told you, my own computer requires that I always use sudo, okay? So to add a group, so it's actually add group, but I use sudo on my computer because of permissions issues. Sudo add group groupie. And as you can see, a group called groupie has been added. So this leads us to the next thing called change group. So I created that group because I also need to change the group of a file. So let's assume we want to change the group of one of our files from Precious. Okay, let's change the group of this file called General. This that is owned by General, this test2. So to change it, we will say change group. Okay, change group. Then the name of the group, we call that group groupie, and the file we want to assign to it test2. So we want to put test2 inside groupie. It's going to throw an error. I'm going to use sudo, but I want you to know that on your computer it should work like this. So I have to use sudo because of my permissions, okay? So if yours is also telling you it's not permitted, use sudo to change it. So now the file group, the group of that file has been changed. So let's check it. And as you can see, the file group, the file owner is now General, and the file group is now groupie. Now, what if we want to change everything back to Precious? Okay, how do we do that? We can do everything at once by saying change owner, okay, then use the recursive so that we can add then the Precious. So what we want to do is we want to change, we want to give what's it called, we want to give the file, we want to change this file test2. So we want to change the user back to Precious and the group back to Precious. So we can do it all at once by saying Precious colon. So the first one is the username and the second one is the group. And for which file? test2.txt. So enter. So permission operation not allowed, so I have to use sudo before I do it. So now you are seeing the function of sudo, very important. And now I've used sudo, and let's see if our changes has been effected. And as you can see, from General and groupie, before this test2.txt belonged to Precious and General and groupie, but I've used this command to change the owner and the group of the file to Precious and Precious. So you can see we've been able to use the following command: change owner of a file, change group, and change mode. So the change group, the change owner is to switch the owner of a file. The change group is to change the group of a file or a folder, and the change mode is to change the permission of a file. So pretty much we've been able to touch on shell permissions, but just a quick rundown again, okay? A quick rundown again. For change mode, You can use the symbolic permissions, which includes user, group, others, and all. And to assign permissions, you use equal to and minus. And the kind of permissions you can add include read, write, and execute. Okay? The next one is absolute. For absolute, you use the numbers 4. So you use the numbers 4 for read. So read, which is arrow, 4. Then write, which is W, 2. And the next one is execute, which is X, 1. So all you need to do is you just add up the permission. So if you want to give someone the permission to read and write, you say 4 plus 2. That user gets 6, okay? That is the permission to read and write. For you to do read, write, and execute is 4 plus 2 plus 1, that is 7. For just read and execute, that is 4 plus 1, 5. And you can only give individual permission. So for read is 4, for write is 2, for execute is 1. Also, you also learn that you can use SU to change a user, SUDO to do some things that you cannot do as a normal user, as you have seen me do already. So guys, that is all on file permissions, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you guys.